Good morning. So after posting my last video, I put out a question to you, and yeah, it was about what you would like to kind of see in terms of videos about wild food. I've got lots of ideas, but it'd be really nice to not just do videos simply because I like them, which I do, but I think which is always a great reason, by the way, but yeah, also to kind of, where possible, tailor them to kind of what you'd like to see. So one thing is that you've asked specific questions that you'd like answered, and so I thought I'd start straight off with doing that, because it's Saturday morning now. It's, I don't know how the date, I think it's about the 9th of February.
11th of May.
This is the day before I go into the woods just to eat wild greens for a week and stare at the fire, stare at the river, various other things. And the question was, what will that be like for me? Can I share my experiences of that? So yeah, I'm going to do that mainly in this video. Now, I've done a bit of preparation, my last minute preparation. I've just been for a run, actually. I went for a swim in the sea. I went for a lovely run by the beach, and I went for a cycle. And I also got this great big bag of wild spinach. Look at that. Doesn't look like much. Well, I think it does look like much. It's quite heavy. It's like 14 big handfuls. That's kind of breakfast and dinner. And I love sea beet or wild spinach at the best of times, but when I'm kind of just eating wild greens for the week, honestly, it's going to be like delicious off the scale. Also, I'm doing a last bit of preparation of things just before I go. It's a really lovely sunny day, so if you can see that, I've got a whole load of pine catkins just drying out, shed the pollen. Hope I can do that okay. And the other thing I've decided to do, based on kind of what you said, is like, yeah, I mean, some people really like long videos. Whether they watch them or not, that's another story. Other people saying like 10-minute videos really would be interesting. I mean, I've tried to compromise there by putting timestamps in the videos I've been posting, so that you can just go and look at little segments, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you like. But yeah, I know that takes a minimum of effort to do that, rather than it's just right there, here's a 10-minute video. But anyway, there we are. But so I will be doing some shorter ones like that, 10 minutes, really kind of interesting to try and craft a story about a plant or a process within 10 minutes. So I'll be doing some of that. But the other suggestion was to look at a particular plant and recipes. So I'm going to do, apart from this video, the next 3 are going to be a celebration of particular plants. So the last kind of wild plant thing that I've done today, in preparation for that, in preparation for going into the woods, because it takes time, is I engaged with one of those plants in a playful, creative, foolish, foolhardy, I don't often use that word, way, some people would say, to really bring out the importance of, yeah, really knowing the details about plants and how to approach them with kind of respect and just appropriate ways of kind of handling and kind of using. But yeah, that's a preamble to my adventure eating wild greens for a week in the woods. And here it is. that's goodbye sea, it's goodbye hair, and I'll see you later. So the glorious sunny weather has departed. It's become quite dull and overcast and chilly, but that's more than made up for by the fact that I'm camping near this magnificent beach. Look at that, isn't that just glorious? Tips of the branches almost come down to the ground. And I've set up in luxury, no windy hammock and thin sleeping bag for me. No, we have 2 huge duvets, but lots of nice open space, and the gift of the bluebells still, and a stream. Up, ready to go. I hope the week transpires favourably, and yeah, got a chance to actually fully lock down. I mean, it's things said to potentially ease. It's Sunday now. There's going to be Prime Minister's going to talk about how things might be eased. So this is a way to actually fully go down into lockdown in almost a kind of ritual way, kind of nature-based way, connection-based way, slowing down way, because possibly like many of you, I've succumbed to lockdown busyitis. You become so busy that actually the opportunity to really slow down and do all those wonderful, more mindful, connecting, slow things that one might have thought would be great, and there's certainly been the opportunity for, can be missed. So I really don't want to miss them. So here I am, and hope I'll have some interesting, worthwhile reflections, and I'll see you on the other side. I should not obtrude my affairs so much on the notice of my readers if very particular inquiries had not been made by my townsmen concerning my mode of life, which some would call impertinent, though they do not appear to me at all impertinent, but, considering the circumstances, very natural and pertinent. Some have asked what I got to eat, if I did not feel lonesome, if I was not afraid, and the like. Others have been curious to learn what portion of my income I devoted to charitable purposes, and some, who have large families, how many poor children I maintained. I will therefore ask those of my readers who feel no particular interest in me to pardon me if I undertake to answer some of these questions. That's the beginning of Walden, or Life in the Woods, by Henry David Thoreau. A wonderful book that I read about, must have been, when I was 16, so like a long time ago, which I loved, and then I tried to read about 10 years ago, I loathed it, and I've got into it again. The language is, of its time, so it's kind of hard to kind of break through that a little bit, but it's been a good source of reflection among some other things. But anyway, this is day 8 of being in the woods, self-isolated, without a phone, which I actually went and got last night after completing 7 days here. Just eating wild greens, That's the answer. What have I been eating? Although it's not quite that simple. So I will answer that question and show you what I've been eating. But also just the routine of being out in the woods. So let's start day 8 as I have started every day before I talk about how I've thrived on wild greens for a week. This is how the day begins. Actually, just to end my current video editing nightmare, I'm just going to put in here some of my reflections on the week first, and at the end of that I say what's coming wild food wise, and then we see how my day begins. So my week in the woods. I'll find a flat place to put it. Like this kind of little area has kind of everything really, but it does have a flat and a little flat area. Yeah, so my insights aren't as hugely intellectual as Thoreau's by any means, in that book Walden. But actually reading that, it was very interesting because he does have lots of insights, but I don't know, it's of its time in the sense that it reminds me, it's very heady, it's very intellectual. It's kind of, it's a different style of language, but it partly reminds me of what I consider a kind of straight-jacketed language of people writing PhDs. Like they're very intellectual, and I read them, and I feel really frustrated because it's almost like in the attempt at precision in terms of description and communicating knowledge that's been discovered, that actually the only knowledge that is being communicated is one which is very intellectual. I mean, it's like, where is the creative wrangling with words to try and describe the immense experiences that we have, our immense understandings of the world? Where is the poetry? Where's the wonder? Where is the magic? And it can be sucked out of kind of overly intellectual kind of writing in whatever form. So although I have been thinking, I've been reflecting, and I've been reflecting on nature connection. And I do wonder if some of that comes around because ingesting the wildings of nature. Wildings is a kind of nice term I like to use for wild food because it kind of encompasses everything, roots, leaves, nuts, insects, animals, wildings. But through ingesting them, you really do become part of them. They become part of you, you become part of them. And it's kind of with that feeling, but also with a slight sense of smug satisfaction like I get from just having eaten wild spinach like every day. And it was amazing. I kind of showed you some earlier. I'm not sure if in that clip I actually talked through, but that was just kept in a very damp area by the stream where liverworts grow, and it's very shaded. And it held up very well. It held up for 10 days in the end. And, towards the last few days, I was picking out a few leaves that were starting to break down a bit, but it held up very well. Just stored in a bag there after picking it. But yeah, the other thing is I've just been eating a big scoop of that every day, which is 150 different wild greens. would say the bulk of it is 18 different types, and in the description below, where I'll put links to books and other resources, I'll let you know what's in there, because it's kind of fascinating. It was my attempt this time last year, actually, to actually slightly earlier. It was only a couple of weeks earlier, but it was for a whole month, from kind of mid-April to mid-May, gathering wild greens, and it was just one of my attempts to explore how to address that aspect of working with wild foods in terms of addressing the absolute abundance of the spring. Like, it's just everything's thrown at you. It's a riotous celebration of verdant growth and luxuriousness. And how can you make the most of that? So of course there's freezing, there's just kind of eating fresh and making soups and having salads every day. And yeah, drying is a really good thing. So I just wanted to explore that. So both that and some of the things that I've been doing, let's start with actually daily meditation and Qigong. So when I think about wild foods and nature connection, we're all encouraged to connect with the natural world. It's good for so many things. Just the exercise of walking and going to wherever you are in the natural world, wherever you can get to. And also, just being outside in nature is incredibly good for your mental health. It's calming, it's grounding. You're amongst green, which is a very, very calming colour to kind of be around, to look at, to experience, to just drink in. And not just that, but it's all the kind of angled, contextualized environment that's not just straight lines and kind of artificially created kind of edges. It's just simply the wild contours of nature. I mean, that is something we've evolved to live in and experience and see for like thousands of years. So just being around that and moving through it kind of enlivens you to a kind of state which is inherent in us, which is more of a kind of indigenous way of being, actually. But the thing about that is what I've come to realize over this week. In fact, one of the profoundest discoveries was the extent to which it has been so difficult to get out of my head, more into my body, more into my heart, more into my sense of moving in this environment. Just because actually living in the modern world, it is incredibly hard to disengage from that. And by disengage, I mean to kind of let go of all the habitual ways of being that just seem to arise from operating in that world, rather than just in a kind of more wild situation. And that's ways of moving, ways of thinking, ways of relating, both to yourself and both to other people. But so when I think about how difficult that was, I think about the relevance of kind of both meditation and a practice like Qigong, because what they do is they're a way of settling down all that kind of frenetic distraction that comes from the modern world. Certainly the meditation to start with, and then the Qigong, to kind of energy work which is a certain meditation in itself. It's a fundamentally important aspect of nature connection, I think, because, as I said, we're encouraged to connect with the natural world, but often that's, it's like, it might seem like an obvious thing, like, just go out in nature, connect with the natural world. But actually, it's not that simple, because, okay, I guess we can have like nature connection light. You just go for a walk in the countryside, that's box ticked, nature connection, right? Just by default, you've been out in nature. But I don't know. I know I questioned that too, in terms of its value. It has some value, absolutely, for sure. But in terms of its deep value, in terms of your life, and in terms of connection, being those really deep rooted connections with the natural world. So yeah, that was something to disturb me this week. The fact that it was very hard to calm kind of my discursive, kind of distracted, very busy mind down. But it's also the fact that I've come to this place before, and I've moved through these woods, and what has occurred, it's kind of been something that came as a gift, and I haven't really talked about it much. And I don't talk about it much, partly because I find it very hard to put into words. Also, just trying to put it into words, because once a word is created, it's already creating a separation. It's putting the thing described there, kind of externalizing it in a sense, whether verbally, and then in my imagination, in your imagination, by the description, rather than the true just lived experience. But what's happened is I've entered this woodland a couple of times, and it's an experience which has lasted over hours. And the only simple way I can really describe it is such a radical sense of nature connection that, yeah, it's what I guess would be termed a non-dual experience. There is no separation. There is no separation between myself and this tree, this moss, this leaf over there, the air, the very air. There is no between. There is no me, space, air, tree. Everything is flowing in this wave of connected, suffused, meaningful, tangible, fluid being. And in that state, one can move through with the natural world, and there is a reciprocal two-way communication, and it's not verbal. One thinks and one sees. Every pattern is infused with meaning. Every twig, every leaf is a conversation. Now, this might sound like an example of kind of mental illness, but it's not. It's one of the most beautiful, deeply connecting, nourishing, benign, supported, rich, fantastic experiences that I can describe. It's what I would imagine, and I don't know because I haven't lived that experience, and that is the experience of living, I guess, in a state. This is the state we lived in, like, before the biblical fall, before kind of eating from the tree of knowledge, before we were cast out from Eden. It's an indigenous mind, indigenous way of being, a non-dual state of being at one with the natural world. So partly why I practice the meditation and the Qigong is because although that experience has come as a gift, I'm always trying to understand what it is that one can do to bring on such experiences, because I don't actually know. I would love to know. And then I would love to be able to shift between those experiences at will. You know, currently it can I just wait, and if it comes as a gift, it comes. Like when I came down into the woods, yes, it's true, there was part of me that hoped this would happen, and it hasn't happened at all. And you know, I do wonder if it's a bit like it's a bit like sleep. You know, one has to just surrender to it rather than kind of grasp after it, like a kind of, you know, desperately trying to grasp a bar of soap, and the more you grit, the more it eludes you. I don't know. I'm still working that out. But what I'm realizing, I mean, I realized that the books that I thought I'd come down and read, so one of them here. Actually, that's not one of them. That's one that I stupidly decided to use as a lid one time. Look, I burnt it. But I brought three down actually. Ugh. Actually, one of them, I don't know where it is. I must have taken it back up, but it's called the Wisdom of the Myth Tellers. Yeah, and it's about looking at that. Actually, what I like to do when I read books is I like to read a chapter of one and I read a chapter of another. And sometimes I think I've selected random books, but then I realize actually it's all one book, because the ideas are completely melding together and mutually complementing each other. So yeah, I read this book, Wisdom of the Myth Tellers, which is looking at how, you know, stories, myth really tap in deeply to you know, ancestral ways of understanding the world and connecting with the world. And the other one was David Abrams, who's written one of my favorite books. I mean, this one is The Spell of the Sensuous, and it's looking at you know, I can never say this word, phenomenological perspective, which is basically our experience of the world, like prior to all our ideas and conceptualizations about it. It's like what is our direct experience of the world? And yeah, I mean, the favorite book, one of my all-time favorite books is a book he wrote after that called Becoming Animal. I highly recommend it because it's so interesting, because, you know, I said I couldn't describe this kind of non-dual state of radical connection with the natural world, but through his kind of writing, particularly not this one, The Spell of the Sensuous, but Becoming Animal, you know, he makes a valiant but ultimately failed attempt to use language which in a sense in itself is more phenomenological that actually seeks through its creative wrangling to come up with a description of one's relating to the world. But anyway, what's really interesting, because it's a way, it can also be, you can train yourself to make it a way of seeing. But what I've also realized is that seeing is far more than just perception. You know, it's okay, loosely seeing as a metaphor, we can use seeing as using is just touching the world and being touched by the world with all our senses, our smell, our tactile sense of touch, you know, our movement, our taste, obviously, with kind of wild foods. But particularly the Qigong practice is a way of thinking about seeing as more inducing that connection with the world through a reciprocation of energy. So the particular Qigong that I am practicing there, so I mean we have gravity, which is that downward force, but there's also a corresponding upward force, which is an earth force. And that can come up and kind of move through the body, and it can activate one's own internal energetics. And then one can also draw down kind of energy from above in kind of Taoist practice, Qigong practice. That would be kind of heaven force. And what I was practicing there was a wonderful exercise called Heaven and Earth Dao Yin by a master called Dr. Shen, who died some years ago. And through practicing that, it's and the experiences one has in doing so, it immediately, one tangible thing it does, it breaks down that idea of a real radical separation between yourself and the natural world. There's a two-way flow. Obviously, there's a two-way flow in things that not so overtly, potentially woo-woo spiritual, that might put people off, and that's just ingesting the natural world through wild food, and then going and shitting in the woods. That's equally a more kind of material perhaps, but also an energetic way of creating a two-way flow between yourself and the natural world. And the meditation is interesting because I've done like about 4 Vipassana meditation retreats, and they're 10-day silent retreats where you meditate for like 10 hours a day and you don't talk to anyone, which is actually great, although the meditation is slightly challenging. But within that, like the first 3 days, you do Panna, which is just breath work. Before you go on to the Vipassana meditation, the insight meditation, because it actually takes, the wisdom in that is that it takes 3 days of that quiet breathing and coming into awareness to get out all the distractions of the busy modern world that we live in. And it's only then that you can experience the flux and flow of energy in your body. And ultimately, I've not gone so far with that meditation, but I do suspect that one can take that awareness of the flux and flow of one's own body beyond the body. So I'm really trying to combine these ideas through both Qigong and meditation to see if that can help in some way of finding a gateway into this indigenous mind. I could be on a wrong track, but that's where I'm going with it. So that's partly what I was doing kind of down in the woods. But also just having a self-isolation experience, which was relevant to the crazy times that we're living in. So to bring this back to more obvious wild food things, what I'd like to kind of talk about is now some of the things that I did during the week that I couldn't film because I didn't have my phone with me, and of course because I was just eating wild food for the whole week and just leaves, essentially the dry leaves or the cooked seaweed. One does get to fantasize about eating various other things. And so while I was down here, I was picking a lot. We'll talk about this. We'll look at all these things. I was picking a lot of deer fern. And it's absolutely beautiful, you'll see. And I've wanted to, I worked with that the last couple of years, but I've not been able to capture its beauty that well, partly because the colour doesn't hold up when you boil it to kind of detox it to render it safe to eat. But this year I've managed to do it in a way that captures that, and of course because I wasn't eating that much, I was fantasizing about panna cottas, so you'll see what I did with it. I incorporated it into a panna cotta. The other thing, I've been working with beech some more. We'll look at that. On actually my 8th day down here, I found a chicken of the woods and I ate that. And I was particularly interested in working with it in a particular way, which I haven't done before, which you might find interesting. A very good way both to cook it and store it. So we'll look at that. Yeah, we'll also look at how I created that leaf powder. It's pretty simple, really, but it's a wonderful, wonderful resource, I would say, to, oh gosh, I use the word resource. I really try to avoid using the word resource in any connection whatsoever to do with the natural world. But anyway, I just used it. I just don't think it's a helpful approach to think of things as resources. But yeah, it is a wonderful, what can we call it? It's wonderful to have anyway, because it's so versatile and it's great for traveling. It's great for adding to pasta, to omelettes, to obviously instant soups, balanced out with all sorts of things. And it's just so satisfying to have a scoop of that every day. And I didn't have it just down here because I was here for a week. I have it virtually every day. Just to think, I'm eating 150 wild greens every day. That really appeals to me. Really, really appeals to me. Anyway, these are some of the things I've been working with while I've been out in the woods, and this is what I did with them after I left the woods. So yeah, every day started with a beautiful, kind of relaxing 10-minute walk to where I do some exercise. That there was just me picking up my wild spinach, which is in a kind of nook of the river where it's really cool, by some ferns. And actually this is kind of arriving at the place where I do some exercise, a beautiful spot. And the exercise I do, exercise in a sense, is like a energy practice, a Qigong practice. And I talk more about this at the end and its relation, I believe, in terms of like the kind of greater connection with nature, and in that regard very much connected to wild food. And yeah, so I finished this with a short 15-20 minute meditation. Then this was one of the biggest challenges for me. I think it's about a 6-mile cycle ride, and yeah, it takes me up one of the steepest hills around, which, as I was cycling up one day, this is it coming up, it doesn't look so steep. I mean, and it only goes up 215 meters. I was passed by a guy in his 70s, to be honest, and I'm, not even 50 yet, but he said, "Gosh, this is a beast, isn't it?" And it does feel like that, particularly, yeah, when you're just eating wild greens. But again, as I go on to mention later, the reason for me to do this was partly, as I keep doing every now and then, is to really engage my will, and shift into a different sense and type of discipline, all partly with a view to living for a year just entirely on wild food and all the different aspects that's going to kind of call into play in terms of my kind of willpower and determination and all the rest of it. So yeah, it has been a very important thing for me to do. So that project hopefully is coming up in 2022, 23. We shall see. Anyway, there we are. A lovely view, just actually by the house. And then arriving back at the house. And this was amazing. This is the wild spinach. This is after 8 days, actually, just by the river. And I, each morning, from like the 5th day, each morning I had to kind of pick through to see if there's any rotten stuff. And look, not much. So I'd cook this as a kind of hot, delicious breakfast and have kind of leaf powder for lunch. Oh look, this is some of the stuff I've been working on. This is going to feature in a dessert, believe it or not, later. So I collected lots of birch bark and I've kind of distilled the oils out of it. It was traditionally done to make like birch tar, birch pitch. And it wasn't going to be for a recipe, but it as I was fantasizing about recipes, because I wasn't eating much, it did become one. That was spruce roots, which I gathered for a project that kind of never happened. And here is the innards, if you like, of fungus called tinder fungus or amadou or horse's hoof fungus. Lots of different names for it. And yeah, one of my projects was to, and actually looking at this beech by where I sleep, this is the tree down in the south that horse's hoof grows on. Up north, particularly Scotland, it prefers birch. But yeah, that was one of my fun projects by the fire in the evening, was taking the mushroom. Here it is, the very one that was the innards of. It looks quite small, but it's much bigger in real life, it seems. And there we are. I just hollowed it out as just a useful container to put things in, like loose change or something like that. Actually, that was my plan. And then the contents was used, some of it, to make tea, which you'll see me drinking later. Tea, you could call it coffee if you like. I even tried, bizarrely, to roast it. That was a big mistake. So here we are. This is what I had for the rest of the day, was leaf powder, and here's some of the things that were in it, not gathered during this week. Watercress, freshly gathered, and some more unusual ingredients such as sea holly here. These were all gathered last year during April, so it's exactly a year ago. So this leaf powder is a mixture of 150 different wild greens with some much more, I look at these kind of thorny bits. What it did give me the opportunity to do is, once I've dried and crushed them, like leaves which wouldn't normally be edible, such as the sea holly, even the young ones with the little thorny tips, or common thistle, spear thistle, once they were kind of powdered, I could sieve those bits out. And, you know, things like great plantain here, like full of kind of veins, which would kind of make them kind of quite a challenge to eat without doing a lot of work to pull them out, which is another story in itself. But once you've dried and pounded it, you don't have to bother pulling out the veins. So got my leaves, then I dry them for a day on a cloth or something, on the airing cupboard in the sun, and then I put them in a dehydrator for 24 hours, take them out, put them in a big pot and crush them up. One of my favourite parts, crushing them all up, and then blitzing them to a fine powder in a NutriBullet. And some I kept individually, which is really nice. I might want to put them in a pasta or mix with eggs or in biscuits and pastry, and just keep the individual flavours, particularly like the really lovely distinct ones like wild garlic and nettle. So I think I was making some pakoras with this batch here, with a mixture of a few. Oh yeah, I was. There we are. So yeah, just an example of one way you might use kind of leaf powder. But I was using it as instant soup, sometimes hot and sometimes cold. But eventually I took the whole 150 different leaf powders and put them all together. Here they are. I'll just be quiet now, you can see me blending them. I mean, even with such a wonderfully big spoon and a great big metal container to mix them in, it's actually quite hard to kind of get them all evenly mixed. So I had to kind of think of some other ideas to do that, which I did. You'll see in a second. And the rest of them I just vacuum sealed in half-kilo bags. It's a really great way to keep things fresh. Just put them in a dark, cool cupboard. So on the way to my morning meditation, I would think about this plant a lot, hard fern or deer fern. And yeah, it's thought, I don't know if they do, but it's something that deer can eat over the winter. But it's a wonderful plant, and it unrolls in the spring to these gorgeous kind of fiddlehead, kind of croziers that they're called, these lovely spirals, which, yeah, if you boil them in a change or two of water, they become edible. And so I was thinking of ways I could use them. So I've put the immature, kind of raveling fern heads in a really, really strong hawthorn blossom syrup. I mean, they've been there now for a few days. It doesn't show you any better. But so this is what I came up with. Something that was just kind of sitting in my imagination when I was thinking about the ferns growing in the woods. It kind of combines some of my various experiences in the woods this week. And that was, I gathered lots of birch bark to make some birch tar, partly to heal or put on a tree that I was going to remove a burr from, to kind of hollow out with a spoon making kind of tool to make a bowl, but I didn't get around to that. But I did make the birch tar, a couple of candles I found lying around. So it's half birch tar, half wax, kind of melted together. But when I first did it, and you can just look up how to make birch tar if you're interested, you kind of put it in a tin. It's a bit like making charcoal. You put it in a tin with another tin underneath. So there's like no air gets into the tin, but you burn the bark and it kind of distills out the kind of oils. But anyway, when I first did it, the bark was slightly damp. So the stuff that distilled in the tin, which I had initially, on my first round, I did two, I thought was about a quarter of a pint of birch bark tar, turned out to be half water once it cooled and separated. So what I've done is, there's just a little bit left. Look, I took off the water and I filtered it. I must say, this is the essence of a fire. It's just like, yeah, it's like intense super barbecue weirdness. And I just like the fact that as a kind of product, like with birch tar mixed with kind of beeswax, as far as I'm aware, has been used by our ancient ancestors in kind of Paleolithic times, well, thousands of years, for tool making. And yeah, I just like the connection with the past and turning something like very unusual into a food ingredient. And as a food ingredient, one, I don't know if it's safe. Two, I used an incredibly small quantity because, and we're talking like about quarter of a teaspoon in two panna cottas this size, because the flavour is so intense, and it was just to give an unusual flavour. And another way, I mean, I use birch in so many ways, and the nearest I get to using the trunk of a birch is using the orange inner bark, which actually is about this kind of similar colour to my shirt here, but this is the outer bark. So I'm just going to finish this off with a little bit of birch syrup that I made. Put that around there. That's quite a thick syrup actually. A thinner one would be good. Right, and then ready for the taste. So one of those. Wow. Wow, highly unusual, but delicious. The stars, I'll talk about in another video. Okay, the taste test. Let's see what housemates think. So here we are. Got a range from disgusting to delicious, 1 to 10. And I'm going to put a 7, I think. Yeah. So pretty good, but it's just exploratory and could be balanced in different ways. It's just a fun thing really, to translate one's imagination into something edible but unusual. So the results are in, and actually it's very interesting. We've got a real mixed bag of results. My initial 7, and I'll say why it's initial, it's kind of interesting, all the way up to 9, the most delicious, 8s, 5s, 6s, 2 children, 1 and 1, disgusting. Comments down here. It's delicious apart from the smoky taste. Well, that's really interesting, because when I tasted it this morning, well, I'd made it the previous night, it was chilled straight out of the fridge, and that's why I gave it a 7. But when I came back to see this and I tasted it again after it had been sitting out at room temperature all day, I honestly would have given it a 2. The reason being is often a fault of mine when I'm cooking and working with unusual ingredients, that more isn't better. Absolutely not. So as a taste, as a flavouring, I would say it's definitely really worth using, but 1/4 teaspoon was way too much. I would say 2 drops. So a subtle hint, essence of kind of what's going on in that birchy flavour, that smoky, burnt, birchy flavour. Because remember, anyway, this wasn't pure birch tar. This was, although it came out with a distillate, it was water. It was water based, so it would have had some of the same aromatics, some of the same chemicals, but not in such a strong way. But even so, incredibly strong flavour. So yeah, use in small quantities. Just out of interest, that's the residue, or rather the seaweed gel that I didn't use. I would say, because I don't generally measure things, that as a texture-wise for this panna cotta, I would have given myself a very, very rare 10 out of 10, because I actually got the proportion of seaweed gel perfectly right for a firm but kind of wobbly texture. Anyway, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Joe. Another food I thought a lot about is chicken of the woods. In fact, I had a gorgeous one for breakfast on the last day, and well, the day after, like the week. And then I was thinking about what I would like to do with a much bigger one. So I kind of looked over the coming week and I found one. Actually, this is a result of what I'm about to show you. And this is cold. It's been in the fridge because I've been eating it hot for the last few days. But this has been cooked in lots of butter and cream and garlic. But I've been doing something similar, and let me show you what I've been doing with it. So I've been looking for one so I could show you how I prepared it. The last one I only had one jar, and then as it was a test, after pressure cooking it, I ate it all. So I'll try with this one and take you through the process. Still lovely and canary yellow on the underside. It's just a little bit, it's thinned out, you see, and it's a little bit firm. I love it when it's really soft at the edges so that when you cook it, it kind of turns the colour of salmon. This one won't do that, but I might find others as well. You never know. Sometimes I think of these mushrooms as clouds, and I like to harvest them at the stratocumulus, or I guess cumulonimbus stage of just billowing into kind of life and freshness before they start to tear. This is one growing over a month, and finally me cooking it in the ultimate way of acknowledging that it's a chicken of the woods. Another one I've just stumbled across. It's a shame, I guess, well, compared to things like jelly, which have the amazing ability to just rehydrate when it's wetter, and then carry on growing. Chicken of the woods doesn't do that. I mean, this is a young one, but it's just, you know, it's in a quite windy area. It's quite dry. I mean, it's very dry. So that's it really. It's not going to carry on growing. Just that. Still some moisture in there, but not that lovely, really tender, literally dripping when you squeeze it, tender, which is so nice to harvest and cook. But I am going to get it anyway, because although it's never quite the same as having it fresh and tender, this will be nice, kind of slow cooked, chopped and then slow cooked in a stew, or just braised on its own, quite slowly. Actually, you can see where I've just picked that one, but I've just walked around the corner. Basically, I came to this sweet chestnut coppice because I thought I might find some, and I've just seen another one around the corner here on this old fallen dead chestnut. Looks a little bit better, might not be, but it looks more protected. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's firming up still, but it's definitely moister. Good. Actually, look, can you see the moistness in there? But even so, like, it's not, this kind of happens, you see, it goes like that, it's kind of brown on the top. It's a sign that it's been quite dry. So in the current conditions, I probably won't find, unless it's really deep down in a kind of a low shaded, I mean a steep sided, well shaded, very damp kind of valley area in the woodlands by a stream or something. I probably won't find anything super tender in these really warm, dry conditions. But you never know. Happy with that though. Look at the colour, lovely. Yeah, I tend to find these mostly on sweet chestnut, cherry, oak, yew. I know there's a bit of debate about whether it's safe to eat them from yew trees. The view being that it might take on some of the toxic chemicals of yew. I mean, all I can say to that is I've been eating them from yew for 30 years without any problem. And I've not seen any evidence to suggest that it is a problem. But yeah, if anyone knows of such data, please pass it my way. Because I'm always, happy to be corrected and update my knowledge. But yeah, these are sweet chestnut, so no ambiguity or uncertainty there. You can find them on other trees too. The biggest one I found was on, what was it? I think it was an aspen. Was it a grey poplar? Can't remember now. It's quite a few years ago. Okay, prepared chicken of the woods into chicken stock for about an hour.
I'm doing a ovulation calendar here. Not
For
about
humans or chickens?
No chicken. No,
I already know
pigs,
your
pigs.
ovulation calendar because it's the same as Alice's, yeah.
So I boiled away all the chicken stock, so it's all absorbed, melting generous quantities of butter, a few cloves of garlic, so that prolonged boiling of a rather firm chicken of the woods doesn't actually tenderize it up much more. I have heard that pickling can do that, and I'm kind of interested to see whether 90 minutes cooking in a pressure cooker will do it. Anyway, I'm going to cook this just till it's taking on some colour, and then we'll get on to the next stage. So the final stage, I've really stuffed them into these jars. Put some water in there. What do you call that thing? Trivet or something. So what I've done is actually, that's not very good, that one. So you want to screw the lids on, but not really tight. Just kind of on, but not really firm down. And then put them in here. I mean, this is great, this pressure cooker. You can fit lots of jars in. And, if I've found a bigger one, I could have done, the biggest chicken of the woods I found, which I shall show you, was 18.5 kilos. Well, I probably wouldn't, even if I filled this with jars, probably wouldn't have had enough. So these pressure cookers are from the States. I think they're much more into home canning there. It's really hard to do one-handed. There we are. Put the pressure gauge on. This one, you can't set it, so you kind of have to get it up to the PSI you want, and then just adjust the flame so you've got it just right. So I'm going to get it up to 10, possibly 15. Either way, I'm going to, once it's up to that point, I'll do it for 90 minutes. So that's the American FDA, Food and Drug Administration advice, is like these low acidity vegetables to do at for 90 minutes. I think minimum of 10 psi. But actually, they don't recommend mushrooms. But I'm quite happy to do mushrooms, to be honest. I feel quite confident that'll be all right. So there we are. Leave that for 90 minutes, or well, 90 minutes from when it's up to 10 psi. And then, well, they should almost last virtually indefinitely. But when they come out, I won't show you this stage. But when what you do is when it gets to the 90 minutes, you turn it off, and you kind of let the pressure gauge go down. And as it's cooling, it will suck the lid like really hard down. So a vacuum will be created, at which point, when you open it up, then you can screw the lids on really tightly. It's just if you screw the lids on really tightly before, obviously the pressure is going to build up, and the pressure tries to get out of the jar and there's nowhere for it to go. So that's what happens. I don't quite understand the physics behind that, because you would have thought that it's all at the same pressure in there, that it wouldn't do that, but it does. So that's why we use those jars. Right, that's been 90 minutes. We'll turn that off. Actually, just leave it now for the dial to go to 0. To be honest though, it is fun to do this. Surprisingly, not that hot. What it is if you go any further down. But just let that go down naturally. So there we are, bottled and labelled. Now, all week during the woods, I've been visiting this rather special tree, sitting on the trunk and just contemplating. Have a look. This huge beech tree came down, and that's just one side of it, about 6 weeks ago, like when it was kind of at this stage. And what really surprised me, I didn't know this, is that it's not attached to anything anymore, no root system. But just in the last kind of week, it's kind of burst into leaf. So I guess there's enough kind of moisture and nutrient in there to do that. I find that quite amazing, impressive. Perhaps I'll make some special beech leaf noyau from some of these leaves. Okay, I'm gonna get some now. And you see these little bud cases. There's something that over the week has just, really come strongly into my awareness. I just keep noticing them in so many ways. And it's one of those things that fascinates me, because I'm always really interested in things that aren't particularly valued, certainly not valued as food or an ingredient, but maybe just unnoticed. So I thought, at least by humans, we'll come on to that in a minute. So I thought I'd gather some, and although I'm going to add these to the beech leaf noyau that I started off actually in another of these videos. I can't remember which one it was now. But yeah, so it's been going for about 2 months now, 3 months. In fact, look, I'm going to point. Look, here it is. So I'm going to add, or you can see I've just added these leaves to it. But I'm also going to add another ingredient from this tree, just to celebrate this tree actually, because although this tree, well, isn't dead from a number of perspectives, it's not dead. You can see this trunk is kind of fallen off, but it's not dead in the sense that it's just going to be recycled back through the whole cascade of and web of life that kind of forms in the forest. I just do hope that it gets left like this, because like one of the fungi which is kind of nationally scarce is like lion's mane, and I believe it kind of likes to grow on the kind of upper limbs of these kind of fallen trees that often get kind of tidied away, chopped up, and or like the main trunk might be left, but these side bits get chopped up for firewood and taken away. But it's also not dead in another sense, because I mean, look at this kind of branch which is remaining. I mean, there's no reason potentially that couldn't go on for another 100 years or so, like who knows. But yeah, the other ingredient is these kind of leaf casings that I fancied adding to the beech leaf noyau, just as a twist, because I'm always kind of varying recipes, particularly ones that I've made for years. So the question comes, like, how do I gather those? I could just gather them from here, sure. I could just gather from the buds. I guess I could just gather a lot of these buds that are still left on there. Could do that. It's been a windy few days. I kind of like the slightly absurd romantic notion of just standing out there with a bag and catching ones coming on the wind. But there's a couple of other ways. In fact, one could use all three, kind of earth, water, air, incorporate all the elements into one's cooking. So look, let's see the way I'm going to gather them. Yeah, so this is where I first noticed the other potential way of gathering some of these is, you have a look over there, can you see that change of colour, that dense kind of brown, coppery brown? So you've got a mixture in this woodland. It's where we've got sycamore, we've got beech, birch, oak. There's lots of pine plantation as well. And typically I see lots of wood ants in pine plantations. And in those instances, they're forming their huge mounds from the pine needles that they gather. But where there's lots of beech around, just from a distance you can tell that that's not what's being used to build this mound. It's actually all those little leaf cases. So I'll find a bit that's not so twiggy, maybe around the other side. So it is actually quite a lot more twiggy than when I started noticing this a week ago. Obviously I didn't have my phone with me, and I'm doing this kind of after my kind of week in the woods. But I'm just looking at the fact that, you know, the ants here have done all the work of gathering all these, and they're still gathering, look, and they're still moving. So these beech bud leaf cases. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to save myself some work and take a handful of these, but it seems a bit mean just to do that. So what I bought is a little offering of some oats and sugar, which I think they're going to really like. And I can tell you, in a couple of days, all that would have been carried off. I'm going to swap that for just a little tub of those, just from the surface. I won't go down too far. I'll give a chance for the ants to escape. But I just wanted to show that really as a principle of whether it's from ants or whether from, you know, gathering leaves or roots or berries. I just think it's a lovely principle in terms of developing your relationship with the natural world, with the plant, with the life, to make it more of a reciprocal exchange rather than just an attitude of taking all the time, particularly as a forager, because I think there is that temptation. We kind of look at wild plants and people say, is that edible? That's the first question. Then yes, it is. Well, and therefore, by the very nature of that fact, it seems to mean that implies, yeah, let's forage it, let's take it. But often there isn't that sense of, well, what can I give? What can I give? And it seems like in terms of a journey, and it's actually relevant. I haven't really thought about this before, but often like the journey into wild food, the journey into kind of collecting ingredients, there is sometimes something of the kind of pilgrimage about it. And it's the same way with pilgrimage, that often people think going and getting to the location, that's the pilgrimage finished. But it's only half. Like, there's the return. And I think with foraging in general, whether we want to relate it to pilgrimage or not, there is that sense that if one is just taking, only half of the transaction, only half of the experience is really being had. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about that as a general principle, because I found a much better way, a third way, if you like. So let's go and look at that one. It's my favourite way. And it's going on just down there. Just before we leave, look, I thought I'd show you this. It's been 5 minutes. But the oats, it's just gone onto the leaf. Can you see that? It comes out in a second. Look, there we are. The oats are on the move. Well, actually, that part of my plan is now scuppered. Basically, the whole of the week I was down here, it was bone dry, and gathering in kind of coppery golden clusters, all fresh, all over the water and kind of little corners, and particularly where there's little dams like this, there were lovely fresh bud cases. And I even gathered some up and put them on rocks on the edge. But in the last couple of days there's been some heavy rain, at least like a couple of days ago, and It's all been washed away. It's all been cleared, moved on downstream. There were absolutely millions to potentially gather. And all that is left is ones that actually they're taking on a darker colour. And it's not just because they're soaked. Just, I guess they're just starting to break down. And it was the kind of light brown ones, just like on the anthill, that I wanted to gather without disturbing the ants. But I have disturbed the ants, and I think we made a fair exchange, so I will use those ones instead. But potentially, yes, one could, in season, just gather them from the water floating on the surface. Probably reached the sea by now. Actually, I don't think this one goes to the sea. But in my imagination, the sea of my imagination. Okay, let's put together the beech leaf noyau with a twist. And the twist being, it's got leaf buds in it. Leaf bud, what do you call them? Cases. And, you know, not just a few, but a lot. These were collected from the anthill. And, do you know, the weirdest thing, I think it, yeah, I know it because I just looked, that it was in my video, Wild Food of COVID Times number 6 at 9 minutes. Like, I start making a beech leaf noyau, which is what I've been searching for about an hour. I mean, I've got hundreds of jars of syrups and all sorts of things stored in different places, but I was sure I knew where it was, but I can't find it anywhere. So the intention was, I mean, when you're making beech leaf noyau, is you put the leaves in gin for a couple of months, and then you strain it out, and then you add whiskey and some sugar syrup or honey syrup, whatever kind of variation you're using, some kind of other syrup even perhaps. But yeah, I cannot find it. Not for the life of me, I can't find it. It will surface at some point, at which point I will combine. So what I was going to do is I was going to strain out the brandy and then kind of add these for another couple of months. But right now I am just going to use these from the mysterious and magical beech that has fallen, and a few weeks after coming down and not being attached to anything has just burst into leaf, which I kind of really liked. So gonna put all these in there as well, one-handed, not so easy. Where's my tripod? Absolutely no idea. I think I might have left it in the woods. That will also surface at some point, no doubt. Probably together, having a fun time together. The tripod is getting drunk on beech leaf noyau, having a party in the woods. Right. And yep, this is me at in my wild food experimentalist role. Don't know if this will certainly be slightly different to a regular beech leaf noyau I make. Whether it be better, don't know. What I do find though is I do this a lot. I was running, well, partly co-running a course with my friend Ben McNutt, a wild human in the Lake District, and I think it was, maybe it was the autumn harvester course or spring forager they do. But on these courses we bring out loads of wild liqueurs and things like that. And someone had just bought a whole bottle of vodka with, I don't know, the hottest chilies infused in there. Like, I actually refused to drink it because I saw the reaction of some other people. But there were like little shot glasses where they'd kind of finished drinking them, and I poured some. Actually, it was spruce leaf noyau that I'd made. Same recipe, but basically substituting the beech leaves for young spruce needles. Anyway, so I poured some of that into one of these shot glasses that had like the tiniest residue, like when we're talking probably about, a quarter of a teaspoon of the vodka with the hot chili in there. And I discovered that it just made it absolutely wonderful. It just gave it a subtle warmth without really kind of knowing what it was, that it was chili. So, I found that in many wild liqueurs, that works really well. As at the final stage, just add a little bit of chili in some form. Particularly nice if it's infused into a spirit. So there we are. We shall wait. So you might be wondering, well, what does all that have to do with kind of wild food? And yeah, you might have just come here wanting to know about wild food and not about living for a week in the woods. I would say that, yeah, wild food has so many dimensions to it, and one of those is definitely nature connection. In fact, for me, it's a fundamental part of it. And yeah, just before I go on to kind of reflect on that, some thoughts I had over the week, I'm just going to pour myself some mushroom coffee, tea, I don't know what you'd call it really. And you see the colour of it in there? Probably not. Oh, look, spilling it. It's more the colour of tea, but I guess one could make it stronger. Yeah, just for a fun bit of absurdity, I'll show you a little video clip I'll put in a minute. And yeah, this is using the mushroom I hollowed out, variously called Amadou, horse's hoof fungus, tinder fungus. Tinder fungus is the critical name here because years ago, well, actually not, I mean, make that sound like centuries ago, but about 5 years ago, for 2 years, I had a huge one of those on my mantelpiece as an ornament. After 2 years, I saw little bits of dust, come out of holes where there's something feeding in there. Given that it was completely dried out, or like, well, kind of, I don't know, must have been reduced to about 95% dried out. But it's amazing how the eggs can hatch of whatever it is, little beetle that kind of burrows in there and still start eating it with virtually no moisture. But anyway, there is bits of dust. So I thought, well, I don't want that to be slowly eaten because it's such a beautiful thing. So I decided to put it in the Aga for a little bit. And I did that. I didn't put it in the hottest chamber of the 4-chamber Aga, but the second hottest. And I put it in there a few hours. And just slightly too long, because out of one little hole there was a little whisper or smoke signal, like SOS for help probably, of smoke coming out of one of the holes. Anyway, that actually resulted in over 4 days attempting to put the mushroom out by soaking in water, hosing it, my goodness. But it just goes to show that it's tinder fungus, which is why, with all the hollowings out that I took from the mushroom that you saw, it wasn't a good idea to try and roast it at 200 degrees like I do various other seeds and roots, nuts, wild nuts, acorns and things like that, because, you know, the clue is in the name, tinder fungus. Just don't go there. But, you know, sometimes I'm more curious than I should be. But I knew it wouldn't work, but I tried. This is what I did, and this is the result. Of course, this is why it's called tinder fungus, and you're not supposed to make coffee out of it. But this isn't the result. The result of drinking that was actually I was chasing embers trying to put it out, and when I did actually turn it into coffee, it was, I might as well have just got some wood ash from the fire and boiled it up and added some sugar. Actually, that would have been like really too alkaline. But anyway, similar. Whereas this one, what I've just done, I actually blitzed up a lot of the dry contents, and then I just boiled it and simmered it for a couple of hours and added milk and sugar, and actually it's really very nice. Yeah, it's kind of woodsy with a strange, almost kind of vanilla-y caramel kind of overtones to it. Horse's hoof fungus tea. Who would have thought? So, given that I already put in my reflections at the beginning of this video, let's just look at a gratuitous picture of Foxbourne for a second while I just tuck in this clip that's just about to come. It makes sense then, the whole narrative, at least it makes sense to me. Oh, I should just add, I've just kind of re-recorded this and sneaked it in somewhere. Yeah, what was the cycling all about? What was that all about? And actually, why just eat wild greens? Two very good reasons. For me, I'm still very much, although not as excited as I once was, but I would say I'm kind of 70 to 80% committed at the moment, and that's the project to live for a year on wild greens. Sorry, on wild food for a whole year. And within that, like the way I've structured that, it's every month I've organised it to present a real challenge. You know, that's like, kind of just like eating within 20 miles of your home, then within 5 miles of your home, then within 1 mile of your home, then just within 100 meters of your home, like over a month, like another month just being on the move, and all the different challenges that present themselves there in terms of just eating wild food, like another month just eating potentially raw and vegan. And yeah, not every month, some months just, you know, without a challenge, but at least 6 of them I've put a kind of real challenge in. So things like just eating wild greens for a week, it's just kind of like checking in with myself to say, is, you know, do you still have that desire? Do you still have that kind of discipline there? Because, you know, if things get really difficult, like what's the worst that could happen? Oh, like, you know, you just eat wild greens for a week. Of course, that would never happen, because, you know, I know enough about wild food to, I think, do better than that. But it's the discipline as well, and it's the same with the, you know, doing that and cycling 6 miles a day as well. It's just the mental discipline to do it, because I don't doubt that I have the wild food knowledge to live for a year on wild food, but what I do often question myself is, do I have the staying power? Do I have the willpower? Do I have the discipline to stick with it for that long? So every now and then I do a few kind of quite minor things. I mean, to some of you might think, oh my God, like living for a week in the woods, just eating wild greens and cycling 6 miles every day. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's really difficult. Others of you who have probably, run whatever you're called, like mega marathons where you run 100 miles, things like this, you think, what's he talking about? Walk in the park, But anyway, we all do according to our abilities and our new, well, hopefully we do. And so that's what I was part of my kind of motivation. I just thought I'd say that. So now really this is what I've been doing during the week, gathering, and what I did with it afterwards. So cheers. But if you got this far, you've seen that already. So here's some more frog spawn and one final thought. One final thought from us, at least from me. If you do have a Qigong practice, I mean, certainly one that draws on kind of earth force and kind of heaven force is like, I think the ones where one sends one's mental intention is kind of key. And I sometimes struggle with that, but I don't know why I haven't used this before until just now, actually, for morning Qigong practice, because I don't have to walk 5 minutes to the stream where the water's cascading down in that lovely way, because it's right here. And it's great because standing in front of the tree here, when I'm giving downward direction, I can really send my intention down to the roots and beyond. And then coming up, I can really send my intention up to the canopy and beyond. So thank you very much, my friend.